guys, it's Phoebe. Welcome back to my channel. Another long time without filming. It's fine. We're just gonna jump right back into it. Some of the books that I have read recently. This is probably over the last couple of months or so, and it's not even all the books that I've read. There was at least one book, I guess I can talk about that now, that I got rid of because I just made like a big donation trip of a bunch of books. One of the books that I know that I read recently but I actually got rid of was the second book in the Diviners series. What is it? Lair of Dreams, I want to say. I just decided to give up on that series. I have so many books that I'm reading that I really enjoy, so many series that I'm in the middle of. It didn't really make sense to me to spend a lot of time reading a series that I know I'm not enjoying. I just found the characters too immature for my taste. The plot didn't really intrigue me that much. The writing overall just wasn't really doing it for me. I know that series is really popular, but I just got rid of it, and I won't talk anymore about those books on my channel. That's just an example of a book that I know I've read recently, like since my last video, but I'm not talking about. I know there are also some books that I read like on Kindle. It's just really hard for me to keep up with the books that I like e-read instead of read like an actual copy for like me to look at and hold up and talk about. So any of those books I'm also just not gonna talk about, and just try again for the 100th time to just try to get in the groove of filming more regularly what I'm reading. So I'm just gonna go through like the physical copies of books that I've read in the last couple of months that were good enough to stay in my collection. First, I'll just go ahead and talk about this chunk of the Witcher books. I finally finished the series. Let me see. This is number 4, Tower of Swallows. I think this was the one I enjoyed this the most of all of the Witcher books. Number 5, did not enjoy as much. The Lady of the Lake. Off the top of my head, I will say that the ending to the series was kind of disappointing for me. I understand that like a lot of his work is inspired by like other mythologies, and obviously, especially given like the title of this book, Arthurian legend. But I just hate ambiguous endings, and so I didn't love that. And then also I felt like this book was really long for not a lot happening during it, which I think is just like the way that he writes things that made this book seem longer, or made this book longer, but it still didn't seem like a lot was happening for the characters. That just is what it is. And then I didn't realize Season of Storms is actually another prequel book. And again, I just didn't enjoy this one as much. That being said, that is the Witcher series. I feel like, now I've read all the books, but I feel like I think that the Witcher books for me honestly kind of made they put me in kind of a reading slump. The way that they're written is just, I mean, on the one hand it's interesting because it is written differently than pretty much any other book that I've ever read. But I think this was my first real foray into like adult high fantasy besides like Lord of the Rings or something, and it just wasn't to my taste. So every time I picked up one of these books, it took me forever to finish it, and then once I finally finished it, I wasn't really in the mood to read anymore, just because I kind of felt like I was slogging through the series. So I'm really happy that I'm done with The Witcher, because after I finished this, I really started to pick up on my reading again. Since I just kind of did an overview of 3 books in the same series, I'm going to do the same thing again, different series. So another series that I've read recently, just to kind of jump off of talking about multiple books in the Witcher series at once. I have read books 1 through 3 in the From Blood and Ash quartet. And From Blood and Ash, lots of people were recommending it to me, but reading the like synopsis alone, I could tell that this was not going to be a book that was up my alley. But I ended up picking it up literally just because I thought I could get a good rant review out of it. And this book is definitely not good by any means, but I still found it enjoyable in, I think, just the sheer airheadedness of it. Like coming off of reading the Witcher series and being so like bogged down in that writing style, it ended up being really refreshing jumping into something like this that is written at such an easy level to understand, like nothing exciting literary going on here. it was just really easy to kind of gobble up. Main complaints about the first book. One, our main like love interest, Poppy and Hawk, they're really toxic for each other. They stay toxic throughout the series. They're not good for each other, I don't think, and they are not good. Like, they end up like caring too much about each other at the detriment of those around them, which for obvious reasons is not good in a relationship. Also, there are plot twists in this book that I saw coming from so early on. I was like, obviously that's where things are going. Other like smaller issues with the book are Jennifer Armentrout, like in an attempt to give her characters, I guess, fantasy sounding names, took normal names and changed like one letter in them. Like the main character goes by Poppy, but her real name is, instead of like Penelope, it's Penelope. And it's just like dumb little things like that that to me kind of detract from the writing overall. The second book is A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. My main complaint about this book is that she's a pretty thick book. I want to say she's over 600 pages. There is absolutely no plot in this book. This entire book is the main characters sleeping together, but insisting that like they don't have feelings for each other and they can't form feelings for each other. It's the most transparent, like fake relationship story that I've ever read. Also, for being so long, there is literally no plot. They're just trying to get from one city to another city. They're very close together. There's no reason for it to take this entire book for something to happen, but it does. But again, just the writing level is so low. It was just easy to read fast and kind of like surface level enjoy. Okay, so the third book is Crown of Gilded Bones, and this is the one where really it shows that Poppy and Hawk they care about each other too much, and it's written to be like romantic, of like they prioritize each other like over everything, and isn't that what we all want in a relationship? The answer should be no. They literally do things for each other that end up either are or could be like deadly for other people, and clearly that's not a really healthy relationship at all. But same thing, read it really fast, really excited to read the fourth one. I am reading a Shadowhunters book right now and just waiting for the fourth one to come in the mail because I don't like to order a series that I haven't read before. I don't like to get the whole set at once in case something happens and I don't enjoy it, like with The Diviners, for example. So that's why I'm waiting for the fourth one, but then I will finish this series and love it, even though it's absolute garbage. The other books I have to go over, none of them really have anything in common, so I'm just gonna start somewhere. I read another Kristen Hanna book, Distant Shores. This one is about a husband and wife who marry while they're relatively young. I think it's like right after they graduate college. And they start this life together, and the wife ends up kind of looking back and realizing everything she's ever done has been for her husband. She's never done anything for herself, and she's kind of lost her sense of self in their marriage. And so the book is about basically a middle-aged couple that's empty nesters trying to figure out where they stand with each other in their relationship and where their life is going now. Overall, not a bad book, written really well, as always, by Kristen Hanna. However, for me, it was kind of depressing. If you were to be like a middle-aged woman, empty nester, I think that you would see probably a lot of yourself in this book, which is depressing for me. But as a young like unmarried person, this does not speak to me really at all. And it's mostly just really sad to see how these people have, you know, the things that this wife has put up with in her relationship and the things that she kind of has like accepted as normal, and then how she struggles to find herself again. Like, again, I feel like this is a common problem for women in that stage of their life. It's just sad for someone who's not in that stage of life to read. And also having the perspective of not being in a marriage for like 20 years. It's again sad to see the kind of, not even compromises, but the things that they just have like accepted, and the things that she allows to be done to her in a relationship where it's like no one should be put through those things and still be expected to like stay with their partner. Like it's okay to be with somebody for a long time and then realize like you aren't a good fit for each other anymore. And I feel like they just needed someone to tell them that instead of, I mean, this came out in the more early 2000s, so I feel like also the time frame has some impact on the overall message of the book. But again, overall, I just found it kind of depressing, and sad that there was no one to really like push this couple like out of their comfort zone and be like, this relationship does not define you. You're allowed to live outside of these bounds, I guess. Next, I have The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. Going into reading this book, I had heard that it was like very gay, queer positive, however you want to say it. It ended up totally not being what I expected on that front, because it's like a children's book, but the main character who we follow, like his perspective for the entire book, is like a 40-year-old gay man, and basically this is kind of him, like he knows that he's gay from the start, but it's not until like the end of the book where he gets into like his first like real relationship. So that to me was like, again, not what I expected. And then after I finished reading it and was like looking into it, I realized this book has some kind of problematic background as well. Disregarding that, it's a fine read. Again, I just found it a really weird juxtaposition that the style of this book and the kind of story that it is seems really geared toward even like middle grade readers, not even YA. But I don't understand why then we didn't follow one of the children in this story instead of an adult in this story. Our main character is a guy who he works for this big bureaucratic company who like investigates in this universe there's magical children, and some of them have to live in special homes basically, and he investigates these homes to make sure that they're taking adequate care of the children. So it would have made more sense to me to follow a child's perspective instead of the adult's perspective. I think it would have been more fun, I guess, because again, it's a case of I'm not in the shoes of this main character. I've never been in that position. I never will be in that position. So it's a good book. It's a cute story. Just not what I expected, I guess is what I'm saying. And again, there's some problematic background of what I've read was that the author was inspired to write this book about these like magical children who live in special homes, because of Canada taking Native children like away from their Indigenous people and raising them to basically separate them from their culture. And the author was like, well, I can't relate to that because I'm not an Indigenous person, but what if I write like this fun fantasy book about it, and the kids, instead of being Native people, are magic children instead, and that way maybe I can relate to their struggles, I guess. So I don't know for sure if that's true or not. If it is true, it's icky, in my opinion. So I've got really mixed feelings about this book, but that was that. I also read The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. This book, again, kind of mixed feelings about at the end of the day. It was good. It was well written. This book is about the queen or princess, I'm not going to say this right, Briseis. I'm going to say Briseis. So it's like it's a retelling basically of the Iliad from this woman's perspective, and she is a Trojan woman kidnapped by the Greeks and is Achilles' bed slave. So this story is from her perspective and talks about the plights of the women who were in the Greek camp during like the siege of Troy, which I think it's set up to be like a really good feminist story, but I think it kind of got off track here. There are some perspectives that most of the book is from Breezy's perspective. Some of the perspective is from Achilles, and to me that doesn't make sense because I'm here for the female perspective of a story that historically it's only the male perspective is talked about, and definitely not these women during this period who were slaves, like this period being like the 10-year siege of Troy. And so there are so many things that are from Achilles and like the men's perspective of this war. I was like, I'm not here to hear more about what these men were going through at this time, whatever. And another thing is that at the end of the book, spoiler alert for something that is like a myth from thousands of years ago, she's freed, and the book literally ends with her being like, now I'm like my own person again and my story can finally start. And I was like, I've been reading your story, or I thought I was reading your story. If now something else is going to happen and like your story is starting, like that's what I want to hear. Like I'm here for your story. You're like the untold story of this woman and the like women, whatever. So that kind of bummed me out. I feel like there was more potential here than ended up really getting tapped into at the end of the day. Still a really interesting read. Especially if you were like a Greek mythology kid. I also read Emily St. John Mandel's new book, Sea of Tranquility. This one really surprised me. I had been really excited to read it. I love Station 11 by her. And so this I understood to be kind of a sci-fi book with some characters like hundreds of years in the future who like live on moon colonies, more or less. And I don't want to give too much away from this book because as you read it, there are so many twists and turns that I did not see coming, and it's really short. It's a really quick read. The only things I will say about it to maybe intrigue people more would be time travel and simulation theory. This book is absolutely fascinating. I'm so glad that I picked it up and read it. Definitely like a top read from the year. Realizing now that I really need to pick off this bargain priced sticker, but I read One by One by Ruth Ware. This is about a group of people who are on a corporate retreat in a ski lodge in France. Yes, France. There's a big avalanche. Everyone gets trapped inside the ski lodge, and mysteriously guests start dying one by one. I loved this book. I love Ruth Ware, so I kind of expected it to be really good. Excellent twists and turns, very creepy, like kind of nail biter, trying to figure out who the culprit is, why they're doing this. I think this would be really great to read in a ski lodge in winter, to be absolutely terrified about the people that you're staying with. I really liked this book. Again, so glad I got it. And of course, as a big true crime, especially true crime podcast fan, I had to pick up Ashley Flower, the host of Crime Junkie. I had to pick up her book, All Good People Here. I pre-ordered this book months ago. This is a book, like the Witcher books, like I said, I don't like ambiguous endings. So off the top, I will say this book has a very ambiguous ending. That had me like Googling, is she coming out with a second book? Like, that can't be the end. Unfortunately, it is the end. So if you, like me, don't like ambiguous endings, maybe just don't. Because this is going to frustrate me until the day I die. Also, the first half of the book, easily, I thought was so slow. I was just waiting for like things to pick up because I felt like a lot of questions were being raised, but nothing was really there was no resolution to the questions that were being raised. It didn't feel like the main character was getting any closer to getting answers, so that was super frustrating to read. And then when it finally did pick up and there were so many like twists and turns that really had me going, and then it ends so abruptly that you still don't know what happens. So I do love Ashley Flowers. I love Crime Junkie. I had higher hopes for this book. It's not the best thriller that I've ever read. And I feel like if the author wasn't who she is, I probably would be more upset about it. Not a bad book by any means, but definitely not. It's a first book. Maybe that's how I put it. How I'll put it. It's definitely a debut novel. Those are all of the books that I have read recently. Thank you so much for watching. I will make the thousandth promise to be better about filming what I'm reading, because I do love talking about the books that I'm reading and all things book related. I've just been in a bit of a slump and I don't know why. I don't know how to get out of it, but we're gonna work on that. I will see you guys in my next video. Hopefully it'll be soon.